Welcome back to another video. As you can see, maybe from the three guys here and the title, we are taking a look at, one player for every team that I think will be the most improved for their team next season. So not this past season, but this upcoming season. And that means obviously no rookies are going to be involved since they have yet to play a game in the league. They can't obviously be a most improved candidate if they never played. As you can see, these are like some of the three guys I think will be some of the most improved in the whole league in general. This is obviously bearing, any moves that will happen in free agency still, or trades. But, because that could change a lot based off roles and all that. But anyways, let's jump straight in. Number one, we have the 76ers with Tyrese Maxey. Obviously, it's really hard for him to improve more when he just won most improved. And, if he improves anymore, it's basically like MVP caliber. But, I don't know. The only other player on this team I really considered was Kelly Oubre. Or even maybe really sneaky pick was like Ricky Council, just based off how he's been playing. He had a really good game in Summer League. And I feel like he's, relatively pretty good. I think in the time he had some minutes and in the G League, all that. But anyways, I don't think he's going to get real minutes. So, yeah, I had to go with Tyrese Maxey, I think, just because if you look at this team, a lot of the players on this team are, relatively, older players where I don't see them improving too much from where they're at, at least. I feel like all the players on this team are kind of what they are. The only other person I considered, like I said, was maybe like Kelly Oubre, just because this is the best team he's been playing with. But for Tyrese Maxey, I think he's going to be obviously going to get a lot better playing with, someone like Paul George, who I think is a really, really good fit. Last time he played with someone, with that caliber of play, aside from, Joel Embiid, I think it was, just not a good fit with James Harden. But I think it's a lot better fit here with Paul George. So I think that there is a chance that Tyrese Maxey takes another step just because he has, two star players around him. And I think it's going to help him a lot. Next for the Bucks, we have Andre Jackson Jr. And similar to the 76ers, this is another roster where it's kind of hard to really choose a most improved player on this team for next season when, like I said, another thing for this team is they have a relatively old roster. A lot of the younger guys don't even really get minutes. But this one I think is a pretty good pick. Andre Jackson Jr., last year he shot 37% from three in his rookie season. And I think he could be a really big impact player. They lost Malik Beasley in free agency, so they lose a lot of shooting right there. And unless they, replace it in free agency, I could definitely see Andre Jackson at least trying to repair that role that Malik Beasley had. And I could definitely see him being someone where, in the playoffs or in big games, this guy's playing, a pretty good amount of minutes and having a pretty good impact on the team. Like I said, it's pretty hard for this team. Again, another team where it's hard to choose, a most improved. But that's why I'm going with Andre Jackson. I think he could definitely play some pretty good minutes for this team next season. And obviously, like I said, with the rest of the roster, it's pretty hard. Next is the Bulls. And I feel like the easy answer here is someone like maybe a Josh Giddey who they just got. It was really between Josh Giddey, Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, and Dalen Terry. But the reason I wanted Dalen Terry is kind of just because, one, Kobe White, I don't know how much more he's going to improve from last season as he had a really, really good year. And I kind of want to have a pick that's a little more out there. And I feel like Dalen Terry is going to have obviously a lot more minutes on this team where it's a lot younger of a team. He didn't really play too much his first 2 years in the league. And, obviously them going the rebuild route and a lot of young guys on this team, they're going to be giving minutes to younger guys, especially if people are not performing. And with the loss of DeRozan, obviously a lot more minutes are going to be freed up at the wing position. They drafted Buzelis, so he's obviously going to be someone who takes some of those minutes. But I think Dalen Terry is going to play a lot more. And as you see, kind of when we get down this list even a lot more, later on, I think just a lot of players, how much they improve is really just, can they get the opportunity or can they not? They're all in the NBA. A lot of these guys are really talented. I feel like sometimes it just comes down to can they get the opportunity? And if he's playing 30 minutes a game compared to 10, he's obviously going to, have a lot more, development in the league. And I think Dalen Terry is going to have a bigger year this year. His worst thing, I think, that he could, definitely help him get better if he can improve on it is shooting the ball. You're going to be playing with, Josh Giddey. I think shooting the ball is something that he's going to have to do better at. And if he does that, he's going to be a really good player, though. So I went with Dalen Terry. I felt like it's a little bit more out there for the Bulls. But I could definitely, see him being someone that could really, really improve for this team as they're kind of entering, more of a rebuild. Next, we have, for the Cleveland Cavaliers, Evan Mobley. And, a lot of players on this are going to be, not star players or too big of names usually. For them, I do have, Evan Mobley, one of their obviously best players on the team. Last year, he, kind of dealt with injury. He didn't, shoot the ball too good percentage-wise, like from the field. From the three, he shot pretty good. But, yeah, he's relatively, I think, had a down year. And I feel like, dealing with injuries and I don't know if you've heard about it, but I feel like when they were in the playoffs and just overall throughout the season, a lot of people have said, Evan Mobley hasn't taken the next step to really get better. Like, he's been relatively the same player since he came into the league. I think this is the year he's going to really improve. He's still a really young player. And if you look at a lot of these other guys on the team that I think, you could choose, maybe Darius Garland, Craig Porter, Sam Merrill, I guess, maybe. I don't know. But I have Evan Mobley. I think he's going to take a bigger step in scoring the ball. We kind of saw it late in that Celtics series. He had that really, really big game when they kind of had a really injured team. He was really the only guy out there. But I feel like there's games he's going to have like that. He's going to take a bigger role in trying to score the ball. I think he's going to take it personal that everyone's kind of saying, he hasn't really taken the next step in trying to develop, more of an offensive game. So I have Evan Mobley for the Cavs. Next, we have the Celtics. And again, another team that's pretty hard to choose for. A lot of the guys on this team are kind of in their prime or already just such a really good team. So it's kind of hard because a lot of the younger guys, it's hard to really get minutes on this team because how good the team is. And overall, it's just hard for a team like this to really grow. But I have Peyton Pritchard. 2 years ago, I'm pretty sure he requested a trade, and I think it was really just because of his minutes. And then last year, he got a lot more minutes than he had, and he played obviously really good. I think Peyton Pritchard's someone where if you put him on a team like, not the Celtics, put him in a starting point guard role, he could average pretty good amount of points. And I do think Peyton Pritchard's pretty good. And, maybe someone that could be a sneaky six-man of the year candidate for this team. I think he's been, really, really good. He's still relatively young. And if I had to choose, like I said, for someone to be most improved on this team is Peyton Pritchard. I think he could definitely provide some big impact, especially with Drew Holiday getting older. Maybe, they don't want to play Drew Holiday 36 minutes plus in a game in the regular season sometimes, just to keep him fresh for the playoffs and stuff like that. And then they, want to play Peyton Pritchard a little bit more. So I do really like Peyton Pritchard for the Celtics to be most improved next year. It's just a really hard team to choose it for. Next, we have the Clippers with Bones Highland. And this is kind of one that I'm hoping at least he can get some minutes. It looks like they're going to move on from Russell Westbrook, which for Bones Highland's sake, I hope they do. And yeah, the only other person I really thought about on this team was maybe Derrick Jones. He had a really good year in Dallas. Maybe he could come to this team and play pretty good. But aside from that, I feel like Terrence Mann's already kind of who he is. I feel like a lot of their other younger guys are kind of who they are. I think Bones Highland, I'm still confused why they traded for him, and now he's kind of like someone that they don't really play too much. Obviously, since then, they've got James Harden. But he was really good on the Nuggets. Obviously, now on the Clippers, there's games where he's literally a DNP, and I don't really get it because this guy is a bucket getter. He's a pure scorer, and I think especially with losing Paul George, a big scorer for your team, you're going to have to find a third guy that could really, score the ball aside from, James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. And I feel like maybe, Bones Highland comes off the bench. He could provide a pretty big role for this team off the bench, I think. And so that's why I'm going with Bones Highland for the Clippers. Next, for the Grizzlies, we have G.G. Jackson. And, last year they had a basically wash of a year. So, statistically speaking, he might not have a better statistical season or next year than, this season. Just because his role might obviously decrease with, Ja Morant coming back, Jaren Jackson, Desmond Bane. They have a lot of guys obviously that didn't really play too much, and so maybe he won't average as many points. But it's hard to choose anyone else on this team to be a more improved player when, last season he was like the youngest player in the draft, drafted in the second round. Really, I think really big steal. He's, I think, really good. I would like to honestly see him maybe on a different team where he has, more of that leeway to kind of, be kind of a main option type of guy for a few years maybe. But instead, I think he could be a really big impact for Memphis, whether they have him in the starting lineup or off the bench. I think he'll be a really nice addition to a team that's looking obviously more to compete this year than they obviously did last year. And that's why I'm going with G.G. Jackson for the Grizzlies. Next, we have the Hawks, which this one we have Dyson Daniels. I was really thinking about Onyeka Okongwu because I think they're going to move on from Clint Capella. And Onyeka, in the games he has played more minutes where, they don't have Clint Capella, he has looked really good. But I have Dyson Daniels here. Obviously, just based off where he was playing, I feel like it was hard for him to really try to, do more on offense or just even have a pretty big role in this team. I mean, they had a lot of players, obviously, CJ McCollum, Zion. Like, they have a lot of options. Now he's going to the Hawks, obviously, in the DeJounte Murray trade. And I feel like he's actually a pretty good fit next to Trae Young. He's a taller guard that provides defense. So, it kind of helps out, the defensive end for having Trae Young on his side. And I just think overall Dyson Daniels is going to take a really big step now that he's going to the Hawks. And like I said, the only other person I could really consider for this is Onyeka on this team. But yeah, I think Dyson Daniels is someone that if I were to buy, stock into after the trade, this is one of the guys I think that will be really nice on this Hawks team where I don't really know the direction of the team that they're going in, but I think he'll still be really nice next year for them for sure. Next, we have the Heat, and I have Nikola Jovic. Kind of reason I have it is I feel like he's been another guy that's been really good whenever he actually gets minutes, and I feel like that's what a lot of players, like I said kind of earlier on, a lot of these are going to be based off, I think, opportunity. He's been obviously in the league for a few years. They're probably, a little bit more confident in playing him in bigger moments, developed, the last few years. And especially now with the loss of Cody Martin going to the 76ers, I think it's Caleb Martin. Caleb Martin going to the 76ers. Obviously, it's going to be a big loss for them at like kind of the wing position. I think, Nikola Jovic really helps, provide something for them, to replace that. And I think, for a relatively young player, I think he still has a lot of upside. And that's why I have him going to the Heat. It was another team where I didn't really know who I wanted to choose. I mean, Jaime Jaquez, I don't know how much I really think he's going to improve just because he was a relatively older rookie. I think that maybe he's going to stick around being somewhat like that for most of his career. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe he proves me wrong. But, yeah, I have Jovic for the Heat. For the Hornets, I have Mark Williams. And I feel like a lot of people talk about, obviously, the center need for the Hornets. And then the one thing that I kind of always remember is that they still have Mark Williams. Obviously he was a first-round pick, and last year he only played 30 games, and I think he's going to be really good. He only played 30 games last year, and obviously on this really young Hornets team, I think he's going to provide big minutes at center, which was definitely for sure one of their biggest problems. But overall, I could see a lot of players on this team improving, so it could not be Mark Williams that's the most improved on this team. Brandon Miller, I could see taking a really big jump because he was really good his rookie year. LaMelo, if he could stay healthy, I think could be really nice. And overall, I think, Trey Mann, they have just overall, I think, a really nice young team. But I wanted to put something that I think is a little bit more out there that people don't talk about too much is Mark Williams. I think Mark Williams is a pretty good center. Obviously, it's a little bit harder for him to do too much, in the modern game as he is pretty big. He's not, a shooter. But I still think he provides, obviously, really big minutes at center for them next year. Hoping that he obviously could, stay healthy and not play 30 games like he did this season. For the Utah Jazz, I have Keontae George. And yeah, I mean, obviously I don't put too much stock into Summer League, but he did just drop like 30 the other night in Summer League. And overall, he had a really good rookie year. I expect, if I had to bet on a guy to win, most improved, he's one of the guys that are at the top of the list. Like, Keontae George, I think, will be a really, really nice player in this league. And, maybe, hopefully, they actually do, move on from Jordan Clarkson or some of these other guards on the team. And he has a really big role in this team. His role has increased more from, the start of, last season to the end of it. And I think it's going to keep obviously increasing with Keontae George, providing big minutes, a good shooter, overall just, good pass. I think he's just a point guard that provides everything you would want in a point guard. And I think, depending on the Lauri Markkanen situation, that could also change a little bit too. If they trade him, maybe even, gets more of a kind of the opportunity to shoot the ball more, stuff like that. But yeah, for the Jazz, I have Keontae George. For the Kings, I have Keegan Murray. Obviously, with the addition of DeMar DeRozan, I think is going to be a big help in getting Keegan Murray a lot of open shots. Relatively, decent spacing, I guess you could say, on this team-ish. If they have the ball in DeRozan's hand, I could definitely see some plays where DeRozan has the ball and he sees, a double team coming or something, and Keegan Murray's open. I think Keegan Murray's going to be a big, big part in this team if they really want to compete. I think he has to take the next step. I don't think Sabonis, Fox, and DeRozan is enough for them to compete in today's NBA. It's just the league's amazing, and especially the West in general. I think they're going to have to, get a big help from Keegan Murray. And, I definitely think you see flashes of it. Last year, he had that game where I think he had, 11, 12 3-pointers or something like that. I could definitely see a big, big jump for Keegan Murray, hopefully. And it's kind of harder to choose anyone else on this team, I think, that will have a bigger jump. So I think it will be Keegan Murray for the Kings. For the Knicks, I have Miles McBride. And that's obviously assuming that he will be on this team the whole season. Obviously, there was some rumors that he possibly was in the possibly could have been in the Mikal Bridges trade, but they, hoped that they could keep him out of it, and they did. But yeah, I definitely see Miles McBride providing really, really big minutes at point guard off the bench for Jalen Brunson. You kind of seen it last year in the playoffs when Jalen Brunson went down with injury. Miles McBride, he definitely, played pretty well in that playoff series when, Jalen Brunson went down. And he is, again, another guy that relatively young. And I think that he could definitely take a big jump. Someone that on a team with already a lot of depth, I think he can come off the bench and provide pretty big minutes and be one of their best bench players. So that's why I have, for the Knicks, Miles McBride. For the Lakers, I have Max Christie. Another team where it's kind of hard to choose one. I don't know if Austin Reeves is going to get much better than he is. And I think Max Christie, he should have gotten minutes a lot more last season. He really didn't. Darvin Ham, for some reason, didn't play him too much. I think this year's finally the year where he actually gets a pretty good amount of minutes. And so I think Max Christie is going to have a pretty good jump. And be just an overall pretty good shooting guard they could have. He shoots the ball pretty well, and the Lakers need shooting. That's why I'm confused why he didn't play more last season. But yeah, so I have Max Christie for the Lakers. For the Magic, there's a lot of options on this team. Anthony Black, stuff like that. Franz Wagner. There's honestly a lot of options, but I do have Paolo Banchero, and I'll tell you why. I know, obviously, he's already really, really good, but I could see him taking an even more insane jump this season and be someone that, if you have to go down the list of maybe MVP candidates, maybe he's in the, at 10, 9. Obviously, this is an out there take, but I think it definitely could happen. He drew some of the most double teams last year, and he plays for the Magic, who had one of the worst shooting teams in the league. And now they add, KCP, and I think that's going to help open the floor for him a lot. If they have to double team him, they're going to have to suffer the consequences of better shooters than they had last year being open. And I think that's going to help him a lot with, overall, if they choose not to double team, he's going to have some easy buckets. If, they do double team, he's going to have a guy that I think that he's going to hit, and they're going to hit their shot way more at least than they did last year. And so, yeah, I feel like him drawing a lot of those double teams is going to, be something that is not going to happen as much next season, and I feel like he's going to take advantage of it. I think the Magic are going to be a really good team overall next year, and I think Paolo Banchero is going to take an even bigger jump. Like I said, it's a little bit of an out there take, but, hey, I'm not going to try to make a video with just a whole bunch of, guys that everyone kind of, thinks, Anthony Black, or kind of like just everyone's kind of like last year's first round pick or stuff like that, kind of the obvious answer. So I have Paolo Banchero being someone that could, improve quite a bit and be someone that maybe sneaks in at like 10 or 9 on the MVP list. Hey, who knows? We'll see. For the Mavericks, we have Derek Lively II. It's harder to choose anyone else on this team when he just had an insane rookie year at center. And I think he's going to be the X factor for this team if they want to win a ring. Obviously, they have, Luka, Kyrie. They got Klay now. But I really think, like I said, Derek Lively is going to be the X factor, where if he plays really, really good, they're going to look like an insane team compared to if he's playing kind of like at the level he's at, this season. I don't know how much better the Mavericks really get. But, yeah, overall, Derek Lively had a really good year. I think it's only going to get better the longer he's in the league. Hopefully, maybe he could develop kind of more of an outside shot. We saw that 3 in the finals against the Celtics. Hey, if he could extend his range even more, it's going to look really, really scary for other teams. And I think Derek Lively is going to be the most improved for the Mavericks next year. For the Nets, I have Noah Clowney. We haven't seen too much of Noah Clowney. However, I'm not too sure even why. The Nets are a team that's, they knew they weren't going to compete next year or last year. And for some reason, they didn't really play some of their, younger guys, their first round pick. Dariq Whitehead, obviously he tore his ACL, so they couldn't really blame him. But for Noah Clowney, when he did play in the league later on towards the end of the season, he looked pretty good. So I think now with, Mikal Bridges getting traded, we still don't know. Maybe they trade Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson. They still have a lot of guys that could still be off this team. I think Noah Clowney's going to play a lot more. And like I said, a lot of these guys, it really comes down to can they actually get the opportunity. And I think Noah Clowney is going to get the opportunity next year, and he's going to capitalize. I think this guy is really, really nice. And I think that for sure for the Nets team, he's going to be the most improved next year for this team. Obviously, there's some other young guys, Cam Thomas, Dariq Whitehead. I don't know when he's going to come back from the torn ACL. Nick Claxton. They have a really, a lot of younger guys, but I think Noah Clowney's going to take a pretty big jump next year. For the Nuggets, I have Christian Brown. And I think this is a little bit more of an obvious pick, but, I don't think they let KCP kind of walk, even though he did get paid quite a bit. I don't think they let him walk if they're not confident that Christian Brown could obviously take his role and, play fine in it. And obviously this is assuming that the Nuggets don't make a move and get someone else that can replace him. But overall, Christian Brown, I think, like I said, they're obviously got to be pretty confident that he could take that role if they're, willing to let KCP walk. And I think he definitely is going to fit nicely into a starting shooting guard role if that is what ends up happening. And I think he's obviously was a big part of why they won a championship. Off the bench, he provides pretty good minutes. And yeah, so there's not really too many other options I really thought of on this team. Maybe Julian Strawther, another guy that has looked really good when he has played, but again, it kind of comes down to opportunity. But I think Christian Brown's going to have a pretty big year next year for the Nuggets. Next, we have the Pacers with Andrew Nembhard. If you saw last year, kind of like with Miles McBride, when Tyrese Halliburton went down with injury, this guy turned up in the playoffs. So, he was overall doing it all. He was passing the ball. He was shooting the ball. He was playing overall, he played really, really good when Tyrese Halliburton went out. And I think, obviously, the Pacers still lost the series, but in the back of their head, they're like, okay, we found that, Andrew Nembhard could be something that could definitely grow from where he was at this season. And I could definitely see him having, more minutes, a bigger role on this team next year, and overall just improving. He is another guy that, like I said, he's, still a younger player, as they have a lot of young guys in general on this team. And so, yeah, I don't know. It was a hard pick for this team because they have a lot of young talent. Jarris Walker, Benedict Mathurin, will come back from injury. Obviously, still Halliburton. They still have such a young group that looks really, really good. But I think overall, Andrew Nembhard is going to take the biggest jump out of all the guys on that team. And so, yeah, that's who I have for the Pacers. For the Pelicans, I have Trey Murphy. This I think is going to depend a lot on what happens with Brandon Ingram. I still think there's pretty good chance he is going to get traded. And I do really like Trey Murphy if that is what happens. If he does get traded, Brandon Ingram, then I think Trey Murphy's going to have an increased role when it comes to just overall on offense. You're losing Brandon Ingram on offense. That's a big offensive player for you. And Trey Murphy has looked really, really nice. Especially when I'm pretty sure his contract is nearing an end, so I think he's going to be trying to look to, try to make some more money, which means he's going to have to play well. And I think he's really, really nice. I like the spacing he provides for this team, especially when you have Zion on the team. And so I just think overall Trey Murphy's going to have a really big year next year, especially with, like I said, if Brandon Ingram does actually end up being traded. Especially with the loss of Najee Marshall even too. There's going to be a lot more minutes at that kind of power forward, the 3 position. It's going to be a lot more minutes around there that I think Trey Murphy will fill it pretty well. Next, we have the Pistons with Cade Cunningham. Again, something kind of like Paolo where it's a little bit more of an out there take because, it's already their best player, but I expect him to get a lot better. And yeah, obviously they have a lot of young guys on this team that are really good. But the reason I kind of chose Cade is kind of similar to, Paolo Banchero. I think him having a lot of other guys that, you add Tobias Harris, that added Malik Beasley. You're adding a lot of other guys on this team that are veterans, some shooters. You add him, a lot more talent around him. And I think it's going to make him look better because he has a lot more talent around him. Overall, Cade Cunningham, I think, is going to be really, really nice next year. A lot of people kind of thought he was going to have a big jump this year. He didn't really have too crazy of a jump, but I think it's going to come next year with the additions of a whole bunch of, obviously, some veterans, hopefully some development from the other young guys, and I think it's going to make him also look a lot better, having more talent around him. Next for the Raptors, I feel like this is kind of an obvious take, but I have Emmanuel Quickley, and he played really, really good last year. So it is still pretty hard to kind of do it, but they just gave him a max contract, and kind of similar to Christian Brown. In a different sense, you don't really give a guy a max contract if you're not confident that he can't lead this team at point guard for the next, however long the contract is. So obviously they expect him to be their point guard that is going to be starting on this team for the next 5 years. And I think he was really, really good. As soon as he got off the Knicks, came to this team, he was really, really good the more minutes he got. Similar to, like I was saying, a lot in this video, opportunity is really, really big. He looked really good on the Knicks. Got traded, like I said, to this team where he got more minutes, and he looked, like the same player. It's just he played a lot more. And I think the more he plays, the more he's going to get the feel for the NBA, and he's not a young guy anymore. I mean, he still is young, but he's not new to the league. But overall, I think that he's going to take a pretty decent jump next year, and he's going to cement himself as, maybe with how the East kind of looks, I really have to go through it. But maybe he could be someone that's a borderline all-star guard next year. Who knows? Just because of how the East kind of looks. So, yeah, I have Emmanuel Quickley for the Raptors. Next, for the Rockets, I have Amen Thompson. And this kind of goes to just the overall development from last season. Last year, he didn't look too crazy, at the start of the season. And, he kind of dealt with some injuries, stuff like that. But, towards the end of the season, he looked really, really nice, and he was starting to put it together. And, it happens a lot with young guards. It takes a little bit more time to adjust to the league than other positions. And I think that his second year in the league, he's going to play a lot better, and he's going to have a bigger role on this team overall. I don't really know what's happening with Alperen Şengün because, he tore, I think his MCL was last year. I don't know when he's going to be back. I don't know how it's going to make him play when he gets back even. So that's why I didn't really think about Alperen Şengün too much. But overall, I think Amen Thompson is going to have a really, really good year next year. Still a relatively really young team with the Rockets. I expect them to make a move. They really, didn't. But overall, I think still a really, really nice team. I think he's going to have a really good year. Like I said, the rookie year point guard, it's, so you struggle a lot. So I definitely think he can, take a jump the longer he's in the league. Next, for the Spurs, another one that it's a little bit obvious, but Victor Wembanyama. Obviously I think there's a lot of players that could definitely improve, but it's hard to think that Victor Wembanyama won't take an even more insane development step now that he has, a guard in Stephon Castle that they drafted, and also with Chris Paul coming to this team. You have veteran leadership in Chris Paul. You have Stephon Castle. You add some pieces around this guy. I think he needed help get people to get him the ball. The playmaking wasn't too good, and now you get Chris Paul in a pick and roll with Victor Wembanyama or something. It just sounds like it's gonna go crazy for him. And I think Victor Wembanyama is going to have an insane year next year, just because of all the things that they're adding around him. Added Harrison Barnes in that kind of 3-team sign-in trade with DeMar going to the Kings, and I think that's a good pickup. You add some veterans around him. Overall, I think he's going to have a really good year. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of the obvious pick for the Spurs. Next, we have for the Suns, Mason Plumlee. You would be surprised if you thought you clicked on this video and you saw Mason Plumlee as a most improved next year for a team. But that's because I honestly couldn't tell you who I think would be most improved on this team. Just because a lot of their somewhat younger guys don't really get minutes too much, like David Roddy, Bol. A lot of these guys don't really get too many minutes, so I don't really know if they could be most improved. So kind of for the Suns, it's a little bit different. I kind of went with someone that I think will have somewhat the most impact on this team that you don't really expect. I think Mason Plumlee is going to, be a lot more of a better fit than Nurkic, who's still on the team. But I think he's going to provide really, really good minutes. He's a different type of center than Nurkic. I think he's an upgrade from Drew Eubanks, who they lost. And overall, I think he's a better defensive center than Nurkic, which was one of their, I think, bigger problems, in the later on in the season. Just overall throughout the season, defense was a big problem for this team. But, yeah, it's just hard to pick a most improved on this team. If you look at this roster, they're pretty old. They don't even have a really filled-out roster even yet. So, I don't know. I just want to Mason Plumlee. I think he's going to have some pretty good impact on the team, who they got in free agency. So, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe someone does end up going out and looking a lot better, but they're already really good players. I don't expect to get too much better. We already know what Devin Booker is. We already know what KD is. We already know what Bradley Beal is. We already know what Nurkic is. We already know what these guys are, so it's kind of hard to pick one on this team. Next, for the Thunder, we have Chet Holmgren, another team where there's a lot of guys. You could definitely go through some options. But the reason I went with Chet Holmgren here is just that I think him playing with Isaiah Hartenstein is going to help him a lot more too. Obviously, this is going to be his second year in the league, or technically third, but second year playing. And I think he's going to be even better, obviously, because that was his rookie year self. Now he's a little bit older, got some experience in the league, and I think playing with Isaiah Hartenstein, like I said, is going to help him a lot. Sometimes if they're sharing the court together, you could maybe put Chet at the 4 just because Isaiah Hartenstein's, I think, better to have at the 5 just because he's, a stronger frame. Look at Chet. He's a lot more of a skinny guy. I think it's better for him to maybe guard some at the 4. I think that could also help him a lot on, offense. If you're playing on defense, guarding someone that, it takes a lot less effort to kind of do. If he's at the 5 and he's playing a bigger guy, it is a lot more effort for him considering he's such a, skinny frame and trying to really lock in on defense. Some of those possessions, if he's at the 4, he doesn't have to, worry too much about putting so much effort in on the defensive end, and then for the offense, he's not, his best self. And so I think that could definitely, make him take a pretty big jump next year playing with Isaiah Hartenstein. Obviously, like I said, hard choice considering they have so much young talent on this team. Kason Wallace, Jalen Williams, they have a lot of young guys that could definitely improve for sure and likely will. But I have Chet for the Thunder. Like I said, there's a lot of options on this team, so you can really go with anyone. You probably wouldn't be wrong. Next, we have for the T-Wolves, Jaden McDaniels. Jaden McDaniels is someone I was a big, believer and fan of even at the draft. And everyone I feel like last year kind of finally, seen who Jaden McDaniels is if you're kind of like more of an NBA casual. Just because the Timberwolves weren't good in the past. Last year they were really good. People were like, oh, okay, who's this guy on this team? But yeah, so his defense is insane. But I think the next step in his development is becoming someone that is more of a scorer and more, good on the offensive end also. Last year he had a relatively, down shooting year from the field, from the three-point line. And I think it's going to, go back up again, Overall, I think even for the Wolves, this is a big part of what they want him to become. If they want to take the next step in becoming someone that is more of a contender and trying to win, I think he's going to have to be someone that has to, maybe be a third option behind, Cat and Anthony Edwards. Obviously they drafted Rob Dillingham, but that I think is going to take a few years before you really see something out of him right away. And I do definitely think that Jaden McDaniels has to become a really, really good third option behind, Ant and Cat. And so, yeah, I think Jaden McDaniels is going to have a really big year next year on the offensive end. We already know defensively he's amazing, and hopefully he can get some, all defensive, maybe first team. I would not be opposed to seeing that. That would be definitely cool for Jaden McDaniels. But that's who I have for the Timberwolves as most improved next year. Next, we have the Blazers, and I have Shaedon Sharpe, another guy that, he was really young when he came into the league. Last year was his second season, and he didn't play too much. Kind of similar, like I said, with some other guys in this video that were guys that didn't play too much, kind of like Mark Williams. But I think Shaedon Sharpe's going to have a really, really big year. Obviously playing games would definitely help him, and he didn't really play too much. So if he could play, a lot longer this season, I think he's going to have a big year. I don't know what's happening with Jeremy Grant. Maybe he gets traded. That opens up, obviously, a bigger role for you. They don't have Malcolm Brogdon anymore. So that's some more guard minutes. And, yeah, obviously there's a lot of other options like Scoot on this team, but I feel like that was someone that everyone would kind of say. So I kind of want to talk about someone a little bit different. And so I think Shaedon Sharpe will have a pretty big year for the Blazers and be the most improved on the Blazers. Next, we have the Warriors. And obviously, assuming that I don't know what's going to happen with this Lauri Markkanen situation. I know that the Warriors were really, really trying to get him. And if they do, I don't know if it's going to take Kuminga or not. But currently, right now, without any moves happening in the league, if I had to bet on someone, kind of like I was saying with Keontae George, if I had to bet on someone, this is my actual favorite to bet on for most improved next year is Jonathan Kuminga. Obviously, losing Klay Thompson is going to be, someone where now you have to look for more scoring from other players. Obviously Klay's not the same player, but you still had a lot of scoring out of Klay Thompson. And we saw it last year with Kuminga. You saw it that he requested a trade. He didn't like his role. Steve Kerr was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to play you some minutes. You're going to get a lot more minutes. And when he did, he looked really, really good. He had like a 5 or 6 game streak of scoring 20 points in a row. And he was looking really, really good. And so now on this team where if they're really looking to compete, they're going to need some more out of him. And like I said, if there was a favorite I had for most improved next year, right now is currently Jonathan Kuminga. And lastly, we have for the Wizards, we have Bilal Coulibaly. And obviously he didn't, I don't think, had an insane, rookie year. Like he played okay, I think, but not too good. But I think this is more of something that I'm going based off kind of just his frame. Right now he's playing with Team France. If he could, this offseason put on some more muscle, and he could obviously overall, help with France, develop this offseason. I think just based off his frame alone, he has a really, really good NBA frame for a wing, and I would love to see him take a jump. It is obviously a lot harder to really choose one on this team, as I don't know who's going to even be on this team from the guys that have already been on the team, in previous seasons. Tyus Jones, free agent. Kyle Kuzma, there's trade rumors about. Jordan Poole, do I really see him improving too much? I don't know. So yeah, their team looks obviously a little bit, different, and they have a lot of rookies. But this is going to be a sophomore year player that I think just based off his frame alone, if he can put on some muscle, he's going to look really, really good next year. And so that's my most improved for the Wizards, which is going to end it off. So yeah, kind of put this together relatively, well, not quick. I kind of did it, last few days, kind of looking at some players on each team who I really think is going to improve the most. And obviously this is all, like I said, depending on what happens the rest of free agency in the offseason with trades, stuff like that. So I don't know. We'll have to see. But, yeah, so these are my guys. Y'all let me know who y'all think is going to be most improved for each team or your favorite team. And, yeah, I'll see y'all in the next one. And thanks for watching.